First, new labour market data out today. It reveals that the unemployment rate has risen to 3.8% in March, up from 3.7% in February. Joining me now, Sky's business editor, Ross Greenwood. Well, we shed 6,500 jobs last month, Ross. We've got a sub 4% employment number. Now, that is still historically low. Let's be frank about that. But add in record migration, the highest in Australia's history. This is something we've got to watch very closely. And I want to know your assessment with this data out today. How does this feed into the RBA's thinking on a possible rate cut down the track?
Well, it's got to sort of push it down the track to a certain extent, Peter, because the Reserve Bank, remember, has got two basic mandates. One is to keep inflation under control. Those numbers come out next week and are likely to show again a continuing fall in inflation, which leads to the suggestion the Reserve Bank could cut interest rates. But then the other thing that it's got to watch the employment markets. And in particular, if there is too much, sort of strong news about employment, which this shows today, then the answer is they've probably got to sit tight and allow that unemployment rate to start to rise before there's an argument to cut the interest rates. Just one little thing I did spot today, though, separate piece of information out today from ASIC, is a number of corporate collapses in Australia in the 9 months to the end of March is more than 7,700. So we're on track for the first time in 11 years to have more than 10,000 corporate collapses in a year. That equals job losses.
Wow.
So you're right to say we need to watch that, because, as I say, if you start to have 10,000 small businesses going broke, that's clearly going to be potentially a lot of job losses coming down the track for Australia.
Ross, in that data, do we get a sector-by-sector breakout? Because we've seen a pretty alarming trend in the building and construction area. Of course, we need them. We need the homes being built. Anything you can tell us there?
Absolutely, I can. I can tell you that, in fact, there's two sectors that stand out. There is the construction industry, which you rightly cite, but the other one is food and accommodation services. So that means that those two sectors themselves account for 40% of the companies that have gone broke so far this year. So when you start to think about the pressures in those types, it means there's pressure still on home building. There's not enough homes being built, which squeezes up rents, which squeezes up inflation, which squeezes up home prices. So the real pressure that's coming on the supply and demand on homes is not coming off anytime soon, which itself is another reason why the Reserve Bank has got to be cautious about cutting interest rates, because that will only fuel a bigger increase in the price of homes.
Right, I want to talk about Qenos now, because I want everyone at home to understand the significance of what's happened here. They are a major plastics manufacturer for Australia. Of course, we've got job losses there. Hundreds of jobs are likely to go. They entered administration today. Their Chinese owners sold the business. Now, I make the point that they are Chinese-owned. My concern with that is China owning all of these key assets, and it's not just obviously this plastics manufacturer, there are plenty more. It makes us very vulnerable to a decision by the Chinese state through an entity or another company to shut them down, and making us then more reliant on Chinese imports. Is that a genuine concern, do you think, here?
I think it absolutely is, because who made the decision to allow ChemChina to control all of Australia's production of ethylene and polyethylene in the first place? Now, regardless of whether this was a business that was going to collapse anyway or not, it is absolutely vital. It is strategically vital. So at the same time that the government has got the Future Made in Australia fund and policy that it's got coming through, and handed out $400 million yesterday to a green alumina company in Queensland that last year had basically $25,000 worth of revenue. So it's all about hope and not about what's here and now. You've got a company which is strategically important. So think of every pipe, think about everything around you right now that's plastic, comes from ethylene or polyethylene that is made. So it is a failure of industry policy to allow this company to fail, and to really strategically mean that we have to rely on overseas supply chains to get that into our country in the future. And you don't imagine that, you sit there and say, well, in green electorates or increasingly green electorates such as Botany and also Altona in Victoria, quite clearly many will be cheering the plastics companies and manufacturers are going. But the truth is, when you think about all of our pipes that come from the manufacture of this produce that they make, it is absolutely vital for Australia's economy that we really have some self-reliance in this type of material.
I am shocked that taxpayers are on the hook for a $400 million loan to a company with booked revenues of $25,000. I mean, one of the great concerns I've got is we've only got a handful of steelmakers in this country, only 2 smelters, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 refineries. We had the US Ambassador Caroline Kennedy saying, she was telling this to a mining conference, that Australia's battery minerals industry, critical minerals, it's under assault, she says, from Chinese-owned companies. Put it all together, it's pretty concerning.
Well, the interesting thing that really gets me is we talk about, our self-reliance, and we've got a growing population. So the more that our population grows, the more we should be increasingly reliant on our own manufacturing, on our good. But the problem is, for any manufacturer, it doesn't matter whether you're making bricks like Brickmakers is or whether you're making polyethylene like Qenos is, the cost of energy, the reliable supply of energy, including gas, is absolutely vital to these businesses. The price of labour is going through the roof, although, to be honest, they're increasingly mechanised. So these people are now more computer engineers than what they are really brickmakers, say, for example. But the reality is, if we don't make those things here in Australia ourselves, and that's where industry policy starts and stops, to see a company like Qenos going broke under these circumstances really beggars belief and raises questions about the failure of government, state and federal, not just on the Labor side, but previous coalition governments as well, clearly have taken their eye off the ball about the strategic importance of these types of companies.
And the cost of energy.